I've done a Panama Canal transit 4 times, and on every trip I see passengers making the same mistakes that get in the way of making their adventure of a lifetime. But some of the errors are so easy to make that even an experienced cruiser like me can get tripped up, as I did on my most recent Panama Canal trip on Regent Grandeur. So welcome aboard. I'm Gary Bembridge, and here are 5 things I've learned the hard way that you need to know about doing a Panama Canal cruise. The first thing most people don't appreciate is that the Panama Canal is not actually a canal. While the other famous canal, the 120-mile Suez Canal, is a long continuous canal running at sea level, the Panama Canal is not. It instead has locks at either end to raise and then lower ships 85 feet to and from a vast lake. This lake allows ships to sail 50 miles across Panama to and from the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Let me show you what it's like to transit the Panama Canal based on that recent Regent Grandeur cruise I mentioned from Miami to Los Angeles. First, early in the morning we sail past the Panama city of Colon and under the Atlantic Bridge towards the Gatun locks. Once at the locks, small metal trucks called mules were attached at the front and rear of the ship. These held the ship in the center of the locks while the ship uses its own power to sail through. We were then raised up 85 feet to the Gatun Lake in a series of 3 locks. It was an incredible experience as I watched the vast gates close behind us and water was pumped in, raising our ship up. Once up, the gates in front opened and we sailed into the next lock and repeated the process through each lock. It is thrilling as vast freight ships pass down next to us in the parallel set of Gatun locks heading the other way. Once up, we left the Gatun locks and sailed through the vast man-made Gatun Lake, passing cruise and freight ships heading the other way until we reached Gamboa. This town was built to house people building the canal, and it's now where the Panama Canal dredging operation is actually based. Not long after there, we headed into and along the narrow channel blasted deep into hard rock, about 9 miles long and only 120 feet deep. It's now known as the Calibra Cut, but it used to be called the Galliard Cut after the key engineer responsible for overseeing building it. After passing under the Centennial Bridge, we sailed towards 2 sets of locks to lower us the 85 feet back to sea level. First, we sailed into the single San Pedro lock, and after having the mules attached again, the gates closed, and this time the water levels fell using gravity to lower our ship. Once out, we then sailed the short distance to the 2-lock Miraflores lock. Once in the Miraflores locks, the process was repeated as the gates closed and we were lowered by the 2 locks down to sea level. All the time we were watched and waved at by visitors in the popular Miraflores Visitor Center, which has a viewing platform. Now, after leaving those locks, we sailed under the Bridge of the Americas, past Panama City in the distance and into the Pacific. The transit, by the way, took all day. We entered the Gatun locks around 8 a.m. and sailed into the Pacific near Panama City 10 hours later, just before 6 p.m. Of course, if you transit from the Pacific to the Atlantic, it's all in the opposite order. Now, I'm often asked which is the best way to go. Before I want to get into that, I want to discuss the huge mistake that many people make even when they understand what the Panama Canal is. There is not just one Panama Canal to transit, but 2 quite different routes depending on the size of cruise ship that you book. This is a huge issue, as in my view, one route is a better experience than the other and is the must-do. The original route, which opened in 1914, uses those sets of locks that I went through, but only ships of a certain size can fit in and use them, what are known as Panamax ships. As the size of freight ships grew, it meant only 1/3 of those could pass through the old canal locks. So a new set of locks at both sides were built and opened in 2016. These take what are known as new Panamax or Neo-Panamax size ships. This doubled the capacity of ships able to pass through the canal system and now means many large and mega cruise ships, including Queen Mary II, Cunard Queen Anne, Celebrity Edge class ships, Norwegian Bliss and Prima class, Sun Princess, and so on, can now go through the new Panama Canal locks. So what are those new locks? Well, on the Atlantic side, large ships use the wider and longer 3-tier Agua Clara locks. And on the Pacific side, they use the wider and longer Cocally locks. Unlike the original canal, instead of gates that swing close, the new ones have large sliding gates. The ships, whether using the original or new locks, all sail through the Gatun Lake and Calibre Cut between them. I could see the entrance to the new Agua Clara locks while we headed into the Gatun locks off to our left in the morning, and as we sailed towards the Pedro Miguel locks, the channel leading to the Cocally locks was off to our right, and then as we left the Miraflores, I could see the new Cocally locks. In my view, the original 1914 canal is the canal to go through for the following reasons. First, it is the most dramatic, visually interesting, and has an incredible history and story to discover. It is the historic original one, and in my view, a must-do if doing the Panama Canal, especially if it's your bucket list dream. Secondly, the cruise ships fit very snugly in, with often as little as a foot each side, which is a thrilling experience. The new are wider and larger with more space, and they kind of lack a little bit of that drama. Third, the original locks are largely still the original 1914 lock gates, and watching them swing open and close is more exciting than sliding doors of the new, in my opinion. Fourth, the original uses those mules attached to the ship to keep the ship centered, which the drivers use bell signals to communicate to each other, while in the new locks they use tugboats. The old canal is the most dramatic and iconic, and is the one that you should do if you possibly can. I'm frequently asked, how do you know if the Panama Canal cruise you're considering goes through the new or the old locks? It's not straightforward, as the lines will usually not confirm even if you ask them. But here's what I do that has worked for me anyway to date. First of all, check the ship size. If it is Panamax size or smaller, it will almost certainly be going through the original locks, as that is what basically most lines know passengers want, and it's actually the best use of the canal, because that's what the ships are designed for. So lines with smaller ships like Regent, Crystal, Silversea, Seabourn, Viking, Oceania, Azamara, Windstar, and so on are a really good choice. I've been through on Oceania Marina, which holds 1,200 passengers, for example. Also, lines with medium-sized ships like Vista-class ships that take up to about 2,000 guests, like Cunard Queen Victoria that I've transited through, Queen Elizabeth, and I've also been through on Holland America Zeta Dam through the old locks on those Vista-class size ships. Now, if you're unsure, also check in the Fans of a Line Facebook group or the Cruise Critic boards to get recent passengers to confirm which locks the ship that you're looking at used on their last trip. There is then another major mistake I see people make before finally deciding on the ship, and that is checking if it offers the best way to see the canal, because all do not. I have found that not all ships are good to get the most of a Panama Canal transit. You want to go on a ship which has the best places to do viewings, especially those forward-facing in the open air, so you're not behind glass. My recent Regent Grandeur was not one, for example, and even I messed up by not checking in detail on this. On the Grandeur, the only place and way to see the canal and locks ahead of me was sitting behind glass windows in the observation lounge overlooking the bow. It was very frustrating. However, on both Queen Victoria and on my Holland America Zeta Dam trip, those ship designs allowed the bow to be opened for passengers to be up front and get really close to the locks. Both also had full promenade decks, so you could see the mules and the operations up really, really close. So how do you know which will actually do that? Again, the same approach I mentioned earlier. Ask the line, but check with recent passengers in those Facebook and Cruise Critic groups where you could view the canal from. I also recommend choosing a line that has a reputation for great enrichment, as having good, expert Panama Canal speakers adds enormously to the trip. The Panama Canal Authority will supply a guide on the day to provide on-ship narration, but I found them to be fairly variable. Another mistake I see people making is dismissing a Panama Canal cruise due to budget or time issues, where they really want to do one, but perhaps their partner is lukewarm. There are 3 options you have on cruises for the Panama Canal that could solve all of those issues. Having done all 3 types, I want to share what they are and who I think each is best for and why. The obvious one is the full transit. that I've been speaking about and what most cruise ships do. This is the one for the bucket list and for cruisers who want to see every detail and be able to say they've done the full iconic Panama Canal transit. But you do need time and budget for this because most of these trips are at least 10 to 14 day cruises. They tend to take place at the start and the end of the Alaska season as ships move to and from the Caribbean. They also are part of many world or grand voyages, for example, like the one I did on Queen Victoria, or they're dedicated Panama cruises like the Miami to Los Angeles I did on Regent Grandeur, and that I did from Oceania Marina from Panama City to Miami. The second option, if you want to get a taste of the Panama Canal, but mostly want a southern and western Caribbean cruise, is to do a partial transit cruise out of Florida, like the one I did on Holland America Zaandam. Now these have a mix of Caribbean ports. They head up the Gatun locks that I mentioned about earlier, but they turn around in the Gatun Lake and they come straight back down. However, they then offer many excursions where you tender off in the lake and you meet the ship back in Colon. These excursions include things like the Gamboa aerial tramway to visit the rainforest, which is fantastic, or you can do small boat trips on the Gatun Lake to see islands with monkeys, birds, crocodiles. But for those of you wanting more of the canal, you can either do tours to the new Agua Clara lock system or the Miraflores Visitor Center to watch ships passing through there, or you can actually complete the transit on a small tourist boat and get a coach back to the ship. The ship, by the way, waits for all those excursions to return in Colon. These cruises are still fairly long, about 10 days. The third option, which I did on Oceania Insignia and is shorter, is to do a 7-night Western Caribbean cruise that calls into Colon. From Colon, those same excursions I mentioned were available, with the added ability to also do the historic Panama train from Colon to Panama City. So it's great if you have limited time or only one or a few of your party actually wants to see and experience the Panama Canal, because you can just then do it as an excursion. Now, once you've decided to go, there are also several mistakes that I see people making as they prepare to head off that I do need to cover. Being ready to get the most of the Panama Canal starts before you leave home. First, learn about the history and the politics of the canal. It's fascinating and disturbing too. For example, over 22,000 people died in the failed French attempt, and you can then discover the extreme political shenanigans the USA got up to make the Panama Canal happen. The book most rely on, and I highly recommend, is David McCullough's The Path Between the Seas, The Creation of the Panama Canal. You'll find links in the notes of this. Second, there are some key things to pack. You're going to be outside for a long time. It's hot, it's sticky, and you can get very sunburned. So take a hat, ideally with a brim all the way around, sunglasses, sunscreen, and clothes suitable for a hot, humid day with very comfy shoes. On the day, as you'll be outside for a while, really sunscreen up. I made the big mistake of not putting it, for example, on the back of my neck, and I got really sunburned there. So really make sure you do a good job of that. Also, you're going to be taking loads of photos and videos, so be prepared. If using your phone, a charger unit is a good idea. If you're taking a camera, loads of extra batteries and SD cards. Once on the cruise, I recommend 3 key things. First, go to all the talks and briefings and check the daily program to know how the day will work, what viewing areas are on the ship are going to be available, and expected timings for the locks, so you know when to be up, where to be, and when you can plan breaks and lunch. Second, the main viewing area, be it the bow or the observation lounge, will have people staking claim to the best spots early. So be ready to get yours. Over the course of the day, you'll find that does thin out. Third, don't just stay in that spot. Move around the ship, and especially go to the promenade deck if you've got one, to see the locks and the mules within stretching distance of time, and go to the rear of the ship because you get great views watching the gates close there. When you go through the Gatun Lake and the Culebra Cut, don't worry about being out all the time. It's really interesting, but there's less to see, so it's good for planning perhaps downtime, resting, and of course eating. If you do want to know more about my Regent Grandeur trip that I mentioned and what I thought the line does well, average, and not so well, join me over in this video. See you there.